In our second episode, Brandon and I will explore the current state of management, employee engagement, and the manager's role in engaging employees. Let's dive right in.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Leading Strong, the place to be to level up your leadership effectiveness on one of your most important roles, engaging your employees. Managers are responsible for at least 70% of their employees' engagement. The best managers, like you, lead strong by constantly honing and developing the skills needed to keep their teams engaged. Your hosts, Darren Veresamy and Brandon Miller, are the co-founders of 34 Strong, a company that creates great places to work. Their team has worked in Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and small businesses to lead strong. Now over to Darren.
Welcome to Season 1 of Leading Strong, where we will dive deep to grow your manager intelligence. I'm your host, Darren Veresamy, here to serve you in your continued discovery and growth to lead strong. This episode of Leading Strong is brought to you by 34 Strong, where organizations just like yours become great places to work. To find out more, check out 34strong.com. Today, we are going to really tackle the current state of management and why it's in that current state. And we're going to lead into some of the manager intelligence skills that have been developed and some of the different management styles that we'll be talking about as well in today's episode. So on that note, I am your show host, Darren Veresamy, and my co-host is Brandon Miller. We are the co-founders of 34 Strong, where we help to create great places to work. So Brandon, welcome back in for today's episode.
Thank you, Darren. Excited to be here today.
Yes, it is very, very exciting to be tackling the state of current management and looking at a path forward. A big part of the reason that we developed the whole manager intelligence show and the work that we do in transforming organizations is all about being in a state of helping to advance managers because, as Brandon's going to reveal here in a minute, sometimes they're not the ones that get the attention that's actually needed. I think on the last episode, Brandon, we talked about the fact that at least 70% of a manager's or an employee's engagement is tied directly to their manager. Is that correct?
Absolutely. If a person is doing a great job and they have a good attitude and they are pulling their weight and then some, you most likely will find them working for a great boss. Very common to see the pairing. Conversely, if someone is not doing well, attitude is at best inconsistent, and clearly they are trading you their time for your money or worse, usually you're going to see them connected to someone that they don't consider to be a great boss.
Very, very much so. So how did we get here? Why does this keep recurring, right? We hear these statistics, 70% of an engagement for an employee is tied directly to their manager. We've known some of these pieces for a long time, but is there something that's kind of within the system of the way that people are promoted or how growth takes place? What is the root cause of this? Any insights on that?
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time, Darren, thinking about what does it take for someone to be a great boss, a great manager. And we got it down to four primary aspects to consider, and we call them the 4 T's. So each of these words will lead with the letter T, and we like to think of it as 4 legs to a chair. So the 4 legs of a great boss. And we feel, and beyond that, know, because we have researched and developed and been supported by much broader global studies out there from various organizations, that you really need these elements. And as we've unpacked them and trained on them, we're seeing some great results. So there are key indicators. And I think as we go through this together today, it could provide some really great insights for those that are not only looking to be a great boss themselves, but those of you who manage managers or those of you who are in executive leader roles. These would be important for you to take note of today.
Very much so. We hear this word employee engagement, and we've got to unpack just briefly what that actually means. And when people are engaged at work, their eyes are shining. They're valued for being valuable. Their contributions are seen and their needs are met so that they can actually show up strong. Because, Brandon, nobody goes to work and says, gosh, I really want to show up as the worst version of myself possible. If they can pick to actually show up in a place of strength. Sometimes you might have some employees that are definitely actively checked out and actively working against you. That could be a function of because of their level of high active disengagement. Can you actually tell us just a little bit of an overview about what employee engagement is and the three different types of it as well, just to give listeners a connection to that? Some managers might not even completely realize how important that is in their role.
Right. I mean, if you think about people that you work with, so if you're a person who isn't managing and you have coworkers, you notice these three distinct types, and or if you're a boss, 100% you are aware of this, and certainly in different levels of executive leadership. So when we talk about engaged people, Darren did a great job of describing that. You're going to notice their productivity. You're going to notice that they usually are committed to the job and they go above and beyond what you ask them to do. And they do it generally with a good attitude. However, they will challenge you. These are people that they care deeply about their work. They will push back. They are not passive. They do not just simply comply to go along to get along. They take ownership. And that is one of the key notes of an engaged person is they're going to have questions. They're going to bring forth new ideas. They're going to foster innovation. They're going to have passion. You're going to see all sorts of those expressions. And I'm telling you, you want it. You want that level of, even we use the word hungry, right? Their ambition to grow and develop and learn. And so when you put out training opportunities or volunteer opportunities, these are the ones that they're jumping in. They're ready to go. So those, when we talk to managers, Darren, we've mentioned this. These are the ones that you want lots of. So if you imagine the person, you go, if I could clone you, that's engagement. So let's go to the opposite, disengagement. It really comes down to I am here because I have to be. And maybe I didn't start out that way, but I've gotten to a point where I'm going through motions. Work now has just become a function to support my personal life. And so these folks may not cause too many problems, and you may get decent compliance out of them, but you don't usually get beyond that. They typically stay in a space where they're just existing within the system. And some organizations accept that. There's going to always be those folks, and to an extent there will. However, we like to call them the malleable middle. If you can move them, if you can win their heart, if you can engage them and create a spark, they can really turn right back into or become some of your highly engaged people. But usually it'll happen in the context of a team. They're going to go with the team morale, the team culture, and they can get caught up in that and really advance with you. So that's the second category. The third one, oh boy. So we have an acronym for these people. We call them cave dwellers. Consistently against virtually everything you're trying to do, otherwise known as actively disengaged employees. And I could go on and on about how expensive these folks are, because they literally, if you imagine a rope and the team is pulling the rope in one direction to accomplish the goal, objective, reach whatever the next milestone is, imagine these folks are actively pulling against you in all kinds of ways that are unhelpful.
So true, right? They are actively working against you. They want to really take things down. That's exactly what it is. Brandon, what percentage of our workforce, at least in the United States, is engaged? Like, what does that look like right now?
Yeah, it's roughly about a third of the workforce shows up that way. And that number is a give or take. So in the last 20 years, we'll say that it started closer to a quarter. It's steadily grown with more emphasis on programs to intentionally engage, because what has been understood is that as you increase engagement, you can also monitor key performance indicators such as the profit within your company. You can monitor productivity. You can track safety incidents and how that goes. You can track whether or not people retain within the organization. So all of these are connected. So we've watched it up to about a third. I think it's peaked out somewhere near 35%. So that's about an average of what we expect in the US. Globally, just to give you some comparison, that number sits around 15%. So there is a lot of work to be done. In certain areas, it's as low as 5. I mean, it can really get down there when you're dealing with a situation where just really poor management practices, or economies that they're emerging, and so people are taking the jobs they can, but they're really trading time for money. So there is definite variance among that globally as well.
Yeah. So just make sure we're hearing that the right way, everybody. So if you're in the US, believe it or not, 30 to 35% engaged, somewhere in that range, the give or take, roughly a third. That's actually the leader in the world. in the
There's one country ahead of us. So actually two. So the Philippines is 39%.
39. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, incredible exceptions.
Right.
But from an industrialized economy, definitely the US is up there.
So we're up there as a top ranking. What does that mean, though? There's still all kinds of room to grow. And as Brandon mentioned, it went from a quarter and it's gone up to about a third. And a big part of what's shrunk, what's given in that place is actually the amount of actively disengaged has gone way down. And the estimates on what the active disengaged cost our country, just in the United States alone, just to GDP, Brandon, it's anywhere the estimates range from 200 billion up to 350 billion or above. Nobody's been able to really pinpoint what
I actually read a report where they used the T, a trillion.
A trillion.
Just actively disengaged folks, which account for somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20% of the workforce. Wow. Can account for that much. And if you think about just work comp, you were in the construction industry.
Yes.
So think about the impact of workers' compensation costs to an organization.
That's true.
When you start compounding injuries, which disengaged workers and actively disengaged are not safe. And then you start to compound what comes with work comp, lawsuits. So now you start to compound both of those and you can start to wipe through industries in a really unhealthy and unhelpful way.
Well, this is an important piece because we know that active disengagement is incredibly costly to our economy. It's costly to our bottom line of our organizations. Profitability, productivity, safety incidents, turnover, right? Those things are escalated. But we know that there's processes that seem to keep getting us to this place. What are the actual 4 T's of successful management? What are those? And take us through a little bit about those.
Yeah, so the first T, if you're going to be someone's boss, you need to have technical knowledge of what you're going to lead them in. Now, we like to say you don't have to be the most knowledgeable, you don't have to be the best at it, but you need to have enough to be respectful. I've seen some exceptions, but they are rare that a person can pull that off. So technical is number one, because it really is part of your reputation. It's part of how people know you from a success standpoint. And usually this almost goes without saying. I mean, this is almost a given that if someone's going to be promoted to management, they will have technical expertise. And with that, they're going to have success in whatever position they're looking to lead.
Absolutely. So the first one is technical. What's the second one?
When we think about a very common reason why people are promoted, the second one is tenure. So we get into time on job. So this is their loyalty to the company or their loyalty to the industry. And I tie close to tenure. It's also your track record. It's your leadership reputation, how well you're known, or your reputation as an individual contributor. So technical tells you you know it. Tenure says you've done it long enough on the experience side that, all right, you should be ready to manage. So these two, we said this in a previous episode, it's over 80% of the time, these are the only 2 reasons why people are promoted. And Darren, as you and I have both seen and heard, this is a common example. Great salesperson, promoted to be someone's manager or a team's manager, terrible results. Doesn't work because though they are, in my opinion, and I think research validates, they are 100% necessary, but they're not enough. They need more.
So true. And that's the challenge that many managers go through, even after they've been a manager for a while. And it's the whole notion of, I mean, we know this as entrepreneurs, Brandon, what got us to one level as a company won't get you to the next level. What gets us to management, the traditional approaches of tenure and the technical capacity, a lot of times, what does that leave us at? What have we done? We've been great as an individual contributor. When we transition over to becoming a manager, we've got to be able to flip the switch to start understanding how we're not that individual contributor. You might still be responsible for those same pieces and making sure those results are taking place, but it's for your team. So it's how we get into developing our team that matters more so, not being that individual contributor. That takes us to points 3 and 4. Take us through those, because we know that the first 2, technical and tenure, are the reason that people are promoted to management over 80% of the time. I think Gallup has found that out, reported that in an article last year in 2019. What are the next two that often get missed, and how do we move forward from that?
So number 3 is talent. So this is innate ability. So this has to do with your pre or hard wiring that gives you, we would say, an advantage. So think of a talent to develop people, a talent to motivate people, a talent to be assertive, hold people accountable, a talent to communicate well. We could probably make a really good list. And the assessment of talent is vital, meaning if a person doesn't have it within them to want to be a great boss and lead people and understand how to invest in people, this is going to be a challenge, because that innate ability that we can assess, we can learn about, we can interview for is crucial. So a good list of talent for a boss can be developed. Obviously, these are very responsible people. These are people who lead by example. These are very common traits. That's the third one. And I would tell you that it's often overlooked because technical and tenure is great. Go do with them what you did yourself. Talent gets into, okay, but do you have what it takes to do this job? This is not the same job. That's great that you can knock it out of the park as a salesperson, but can you get others to do that? Not the same. And interestingly enough, as you and I know, it's not always, in fact, it often isn't the highest individual contributor who makes a good manager. That is a crossover that can happen, but not all the time. And it's actually less common. So that's 3. Number 4, training. And here is the big one. So on the note of talent, interestingly enough, as we will explore in a future episode, that there is innate talent that only really few people possess to be great bosses. I think people have talent to be adequate, but training becomes crucial. And this is where the genesis of manager intelligence comes through. What are the skills that you can develop on top of your talent to be a great boss? And here is where we found a significant gap within organizations of what are we providing in the realm of training and tools, not just to be compliant, not just to know how to not get companies sued through sexual harassment or OSHA safety requirements. Like, that's good. Don't stop those. But what training is there to know how to be a great boss and engage people? This is probably the biggest gap that exists.
We have both, and not just us, our whole company. We've been serving organizations across the board, and that's it. That's what we have found over years of going through this. That's where the biggest gap is. We've been in rooms of CEOs talking to them. Brandon, you've been messaging to CEOs, talking to them, boots on the ground for years, flying all over the place, all over North America, connecting with them. And when I ask the question of what's your training program, how do you develop your managers and train them so that they can engage their employees and sustain that for the long term? What do we usually have? Crickets, right? You get like that one hand that's going up. There are companies.
I don't even know that I believe them, even the ones that raise their hands. I don't know, because what commonly passes as training managers, it's a class. It's not a system. It's not something that they can look back on and go, oh, that's what I do. Because when we train managers, as you know, they're looking for tools and training, and they are looking for, give me the instructions of what happens. And then great ones just, they flower with that. And adequate ones, they become good bosses and they do a great job.
So true. As Brandon said, that was the genesis of manager intelligence. So we got together, we've huddled, we've put a lot of our work together that we've learned from so many of our management training programs. And we got into the place of developing what are the skills that we have observed in our research that the best bosses have, the ones that are out there that are showing up strong, that people love working for them, that they make their employees feel valued for being valuable, that their engagement scores are through the roof. We do a lot of that, and we study where the employee engagement is. And what ended up happening was it broke down to these 12 manager intelligence skills. That's a big part of what we're going to be unpacking in future episodes. We're going to take one of these skills in some of the future episodes and unpack each of them one at a time, show you how they work, and even give you some tools on how you can develop it. But we had to create an anchor of how did we get here and what are these tools for successful management? So Brandon, what are those 12 manager intelligence skills? And then as we wrap up, I do want to address what the 4 styles of management are, but take us through those 12 manager intelligence skills. What are those?
Absolutely. So number 1, individualize. So when we think about the skill, to customize your approach to people. That's number one, and it's number one on purpose. It actually is the skill that really separates great bosses from lesser bosses, because this is where I think of people from the aspect that every one of them is unique. They have different characteristics, and it's my job as a boss to learn about those. Number two, integrity. So these are bosses that understand that though integrity is a commonly shared value, it's also a skill that can be developed. And so these are people that hold themselves accountable and others, and they take care and take time to make sure that they're doing things that reinforce value in others, so that integrity skill can be grown. The third is influence. We like to say, Darren, that leadership is influence. And if you're a leader and you're out for a walk and turn around, no one's behind you, you're not really leading. And influence is what makes people want to follow you. And it's a skill that you can develop, because people who are outcome oriented and they have a clear picture of where they're going, those are people that we want to follow. And the great news is as you grow this skill, you grow your influence. And that is vital for leadership. And so if you individualize, you take care to walk in a ever increasing skill set of integrity, your influence skill will go along with that. So those are the first three, and I feel like they give us a pretty good starting point as we get into the rest of them.
Absolutely, yeah. And each episode that we go through in the future will unpack that. That will start to take place from episode 4 onwards. As we're getting towards wrapping up here today, I want to take us back and just summarize. So the 4 T's of successful management, everybody: technical and tenure, over 80% of the time. That's why people are promoted. But we've got to focus on the talent that people have to be a manager, to engage their teams. We got to look at how we're training them to do that. That's not just checking a box one day, sending somebody away to go to a training, but it's actually developing that, right? The way that engagement takes place, it's formed into the culture, and it's actually a function of habits. So when we look at these 12 manager intelligence skills, we're going to give you some of the tools, how they show up when they're in the high zone, how they show up when they're in the low zone on the skill side, and give you some tools on how to develop those coming forward. In our next episode, we're going to be talking about the 4 styles of management before we get into unpacking all 12 of the manager intelligence skills from episode 4 onwards. Brandon, can you give us an overview, just a little precursor teaser for episode 3? What are those 4 styles of management that we see?
The style that is most common for people in management or leadership is authoritarian. So you and I would know this as command and control. This is get it done because I said so. Yeah, this is a very common one that some of us grew up with or had influencers such as coaches or teachers or caregivers in our life. That's how it went. The second style, which sits right next to it, is permissive. So this is a style that wants to be liked and is very caring, very endearing, yet not very strong. There are some of us that can relate to that permissive style. It's a default style for those who have reached a point of frustration. So this is what we call uninvolved. Very few people start from this. They don't usually start with uninvolved or uncaring, but it is a destination point that frustrated leaders and parents get to. So that uninvolved style, we'll discuss how devastating that particular style is, especially when we talk about what engages people. The fourth, which is really characterized by being both very warm, very involved, very caring, as well as control and direction and authority. And that's called authoritative. So it gets the best of very direct and decisive, along with involved and caring and interested. So that authoritative, as we unpack that, it'll give you a great picture of what these management skills build toward.
Excellent. Well, I'm really excited to jump into those 4 styles and really unpack those and how we're showing up as we get into the next episode. Thank you so much, Brandon, for your insights, and thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. Take care. If you want to continue your growth in Leading Strong by hanging out with others committed to leading strong, join one of our LinkedIn or Facebook groups by looking for the Leading Strong Show. The truth is, organizational results like productivity, profitability, and low employee turnover rise and fall based on employee engagement. The world is starving for strong leaders, as they not only impact an organization's performance, they create massive influence on an employee's overall health and well-being. If you want to learn more about becoming a great place to work, or 34 Strong's signature Leading Strong programs, simply go to 34strong.com, where you will also be able to access resources you can start using immediately and stay connected with us. I want to thank you for sharing this episode with everyone you know who will benefit. Be sure to subscribe through your favorite podcasting channels, and please leave us a review. A big shout out to Wendell Fishman for writing and arranging the tune Aunt Lion for Leading Strong. Remember, everyone deserves a great place to work, and any workplace can be great. You can create culture by intention and design, and change happens with every life you touch. I am Darren Verasamy, here to help you lead strong. Until next time, my friends, I'm out.